Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Valuco and welcome to Personal Pans, conversations about belief, transformation, and all the weird and wonderful things we experience in our daily lives. Today's episode is with my friend, performance artist, John Thomure. We talk about Kenneth Anger and Thelema and religions and how belief develops over time and it was a good conversation. Again, these podcasts are a great way for me to catch up with people that I haven't talked to in a while or seen in a while. And then we talk about all the random weird stuff we're into. And John is a repository of knowledge about various things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode.
It's all the same. I mean, it's just, it's just tech difficulties. So
That's exactly it. I know, because we're all bound to these machines now in order to have like normal human socialization, which is great, right? Great.
yeah, I thought it was, I didn't realize it. Like it's John Zerzan. I don't know if you know, like anti-civilization
Oh,
type
yes.
anarchist guy. But he released a book in the pandemic.
Really?
And I read it, but it's essentially just like, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. So it's okay, but it's mostly just being like, it's like, what have I been saying since the 90s? What have I been saying? So I thought I was kind of laughing because I was like, he finally got his moment of being like,
That's it. Exactly.
yeah.
That's amazing. It's so rare that you get a chance like 30 years later to just be like, I told you so.
I know, and you're like,
motherfucker.
while you're alive, because normally you have to have like 100 years or something.
Exactly.
And he got it. He gets it right at the, I guess, towards the latter half.
Exactly. Right before at the beginning of the end of the world, you could just be like, told you.
Yeah.
So
Is that a satanic witch shirt? Sorry, I think I saw witch.
Big witch energy.
Big witch energy.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Very applicable for today.
Absolutely. I figure, okay, I'm a chaos magician, so it's going to be psychedelic colors and a t-shirt sigil. It's all good.
Yeah, I wore black to be just generically occultish.
I think white dude, black t-shirt, a beard, that's like occultist.
I know, it's
American occultist right there.
Yeah, it is. It's the vibe.
It is the vibe, yeah. So thank you for dressing appropriately.
Of course, yeah. I try,
Of
sometimes.
Course. Yes. Yeah. So have you read anything recently? Or have you been rereading anything exciting and occult?
Yeah, well, we were talking over text a bit about Kenneth Anger.
Yes.
So I started kind of rereading Crowley and books about Crowley, stuff like that, getting back into Thelema, just like high school. I mean, that's what I was into. That's the time I got into it.
Of course, yeah.
I was never into it. I've never been a Thelemite. So
right. Yes.
But interested in.
Yes. Academically interested in.
Yes. Yeah. My studious the academics I was doing in high school. But yeah, it's interesting going back to it. Because when I first read it, it's just like semi-satanic and just kind of, I mean, even when you look up, like I've been looking up documentaries or just videos of people talking about Crowley, and all the comments are just like, Jesus Christ loves you and you can still be, it's all, I mean, I think it's funny because I haven't really, in my bubble of people, that never really comes up. But I was going through these comments and they're all amazing. They're honestly amazing because it's people just being like, my brother was a Satanist. We had this whole intervention for, which I like, because I had that experience too in high school of just like my grandmother finding my girlfriend at the time had a satanic Bible she sent to me, and is it Anton LaVey's like satanic witchcraft or whatever? So she found those and we had a long talk about it.
Oh no!
But all these comments are detailing the same sort of situations, but from the family members. It's really weird. I guess it's not weird. It's really funny.
That, of course.
He's still like, he's still dangerous.
That exactly. Like there is still this this like Christian terror about Crowley that it's just like, oh no, this is of the devil. This is, again, it's that fundamentalist kind of the evangelical sensibility of like there is only Jesus and everything else is the devil, but
Right.
also
sure.
that terror of, oh no, he's corrupting the youth and he's gonna destroy civilizations, like, or just inspire a lot of cool art maybe and music. That's really,
Well, it's kind of, I agree, like in that sense of like, yeah, I think it didn't carry us through like QAnon. It's kind
yes.
of changed as like decade, because there was like the satanic panic, 80s, 90s kind of freak
Mhm.
out. And I feel like QAnon's the new one we have.
Yeah.
Because whenever I watch videos, people are always like, the deep state's the devil. It's really weird how it's kind of like come back in like geopolitical
Yes.
conspiracy.
Yes. Yeah. It's wild to me to like see all this, because like I again remember the 90s and remember like and hearing about conspiracies of the 70s and the 80s, and it's like, friends, it's all the same shit. Like it's the same thing that's just being even not even like fully repackaged, just kind of slightly repackaged in order to
Yeah.
stoke fear and paranoia. Like it's not original. Like we've seen this shit,
Well, and my friend Dave points out to me a lot that a lot of like trap music, like Playboy Cardi
Mm,
or musicians like that, are going to like a darker, like Playboy Cardi has like Vamp Gang and a whole lot of red. There's a lot of like metal or
mm.
satanic imagery. So it's even in like it's still in youth culture, even in like
Yeah.
not trying to destroy people conspiracy kind of way. Even amongst like I think kids, it's interesting to see that those ideas are still like they're still finding like I don't know, sorry, a movement or
Yes.
inspiring people to make music, or like the goth is coming back.
Which
I went
makes
to a
me so
punk show. I
happy.
know, it was so fun. I went to a punk show ever. I was like the only non-goth person,
Oh my God.
which was like I was not expecting.
Of course.
Um, but I like, yeah, I was like, this is awesome. This is
Ye-
so good.
yes, exactly. More black eyeliner, more platform boots, more vinyl clothing. I'm just going to be happy. Like, even if
Yeah.
just seeing it in the wild.
Post quarantine is going to be a wild time for fashion.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yes. Just in general, I think, because people are already
Just
kind of
generally.
wilding, but yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Probably being dangerous. I think it's
Yes.
reading back now.
Mm,
It's interesting because I guess like when you're younger, you think of him more like through the mythos. But I've been more reading about his life, or like the
mm,
confessions and stuff like that.
mm.
And I don't know, for a lot of like, I guess it's like a lot for a lot of artists. Like he's not, I don't know, he has a horrible life. He did like
Oh,
right,
horrible
like he's
life.
kind of like a
Yes.
horrible life. He's kind of a loser too, which I thought was maybe the most relatable part. Is like you know what I mean? Just like there's moments like especially early, like when he's like my age, around like early 20s, where he's in like the Golden Dawn and he's like he's having like public magic fights with like WB Yates.
Just my favorite story. Yes.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. It's just like I totally, and like someone calling the cops, the thought of like someone calling the cops on these guys and cops showing up to deal with like magician fights. That was the funniest.
the most the most hilarious, especially if they have robes, or they have those like,
Because they're all, yeah, they're all dressed up
yep.
and like invoking, like they're doing invocation signs.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got to feel like you're disrupting like a children's Halloween party, like,
Right. That's what I had in my mind. Because like when he talks about obviously from the perspective, if you're the magician,
yes.
it's a totally different scenario because you're fighting your mortal enemy. So he writes about it very epically. But then I went to right, because to him it's just was like I invoked the pentagram of Horus or whatever.
Right.
And then WB Yates is like he's just like he cast a defensive spell, which is just like he changed the locks to the building. But you know what I mean? Like it's kind of better almost from their perspective. It's like
Exactly.
D&D when people could still do D&D in public.
Oh my God, exactly. Yes, it's like a LARP, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Pre-LARPing.
Really? Yes, right.
Proto-LARP.
it's LARPing, but like people have like totally gone in and like bought in and believe that like this is the thing, and they're really doing all of these things. And again, I practice magic, so I believe in intention and the power of that. But
For sure.
anytime people get like invested in a system, I'm just like, really, man? Like this is the thing that you're gonna buy into and decide like that again, you're casting a defensive spell. You're doing like Hadoukens on the street,
Which you could.
Yeah,
You could.
right.
If you're a good enough chaos magician, that can be your ritual.
That might be the new thing I start doing. Yeah. It'd be my next full moon.
That would be a good time too.
Yeah.
But I think with Crowley, and it's kind of, I think at that time, it's interesting to see it's people making their own systems.
Mhm.
That's, I think, the thing I like. The reason I didn't really believe in Thelema, I guess, or get into it, like some people have,
Yeah.
was that it seemed more like his life was about like all the things that make up Thelema are just the obsessions that Aleister Crowley had,
Mhm.
and they carry through. Like he kind of just, I don't know, it's like kind of DIY religion building
Yeah.
in the way that like I guess I don't know. I think a lot of magic movements like Wicca, or I can't. You could probably think of more than I could.
Right.
But more recent magical movements,
Yes.
like Wicca. I'm going to stick with Wicca.
Sure.
I've done
Yes.
the same thing.
Yes.
Like being an Egyptomaniac and stuff like that, which was popular at the time, or being like, I think he was a Calvinist or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He was like super strict Christian, but when you look through like
Yes.
his idea of being wicked or evil or sinning, they're all like Christian ideas of sin. I mean, it's mostly having sex.
Yeah,
I think is what I realized. It's like the big taboo thing.
Exactly, right? So if you again, there's that kind of Nietzschean sensibility of it, right? Where it's like you're taking the thing that's taboo and you're making it like sacred or magical or whatever, right? You're elevating the sinful nature, reevaluation of values, right? Yeah, but then it can get like for me, it's always like, okay, when you see like modern movements, and even like I think more in terms of like modern cults, right? Like I'm obsessed with cults. I watching mythologies form, watching these communities form, and you're
modern
like,
cults are very interesting to watch grow. Yeah, the
every
internet
time
has given. Yeah,
oh my
it's
God,
like
I know. It's like I love it. Like I'm obsessed with it. I love it. But it just it makes me think like, okay, these cults center around basically the kinks of the person who creates them, right?
yeah,
And so then why wouldn't you, just as a logical course, look at ancient religions and say like, okay, maybe there were some dudes who were into some weird stuff, and that's why they decided like all boys need to be circumcised and nobody can eat pork, and whatever, right? Like that we have to, whatever rituals there are, like, okay, can you deconstruct that? Can you go back and say like, hey, maybe someone just decided a thing thousands of years ago? And
well, part of that, like in the Torah or like the Bible or like the Old Testament, where you find those rules. I mean, a lot of times those are like desert survival things.
Yes.
Like I remember, because I read the Bible a lot as a kid, but I remember one of the things that always like threw me was like that shrimp or like shellfish are considered demon spawn and you're not supposed to eat them.
Yes.
And for a lot, like I never got that as a kid. And I would just make jokes to it to my family when we would eat like shellfish or like shrimp or something. I would just like wave it and be like, it's like demonic spores. But it was until later that I realized that if you're like wandering in the desert, like a lot of like Judaic tribes were, and if you find shellfish, it's probably gonna make you super sick.
Yeah, it's probably gonna kill you.
So just as a rule, like, and I know it's probably like there's definitely like there's a meeting in ancient times. We're like, okay, guys, so if we find any more of this stuff, don't eat it. Frank has been sick for like 2 days.
Exactly.
I feel like that, and like so much of religion, I think, is built off just that, just like
totally
like rules of survival in whatever environment.
Yes.
I'm sure like I don't know too much about the history of Hinduism, but I'm sure a lot of things like being vegan or not eating beef, like having cows, comes from when people were just trying to survive in a more tribal setting. And and they develop into these then like very bizarre, when you have a surplus of those things, you get just bizarre interpretations.
That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah. It's this, it's again, like you're saying, you have these cleanliness, like laws, right, to keep people alive. But but again, you don't have a knowledge of like microbiology, right? So you're not able to
Right.
say like, okay, there are these bacteria, these organisms that are going to kill you, again, with pork, like you have to cook it at a certain temperature or that'll make you really sick and or kill you.
Right.
You can't do that necessarily if you're a nomadic tribe. So kind of like, how do you convince people like, no, really don't eat the shrimp? It's like,
I know it tastes good.
it's so good.
Right?
It's delicious.
I feel like that's where it becomes evil, because I think a lot of it, like, and that's kind of, I guess, the essence of Thelema, is that like religions like that, they ban things that are good because they're oftentimes not good for you.
Right.
But it's like, it's hard to argue against. Like if you like pork, if you like bacon, it's hard to just be like, we shouldn't, like, there's a lot of cholesterol and you eat too much of it, like that. And then I think even today, it's like, it's kind of boring to be lectured about your health. But if you just goes like, it's fucking evil, that, right? You know, it's like evil instantly.
That's it.
Exactly. I'm just like, I'm in. Like, yeah, I'm not taking that risk.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like, oh, my eternal soul. Like, oh, forget it. I'm not doing that. Yeah. Yeah. The problem with the majority of religions, though, like you said, it's like, it's stuff that feels good, it is good, tastes good. And then you're just like, wait, I'm not supposed to do this thing, when every cell in my body is like, this is great. Do more of this. Like, we love this. Yeah.
And I think it's something like we just intrinsically do. I'm not sure why. But like when you look at like even like the Jesus or Lucifer story, or even like to Prometheus, like the moral is always like, to get something you have to like suffer for it. So if you want fire, like you need to be chained to a rock
forever,
and have a vulture eat your liver, or you need to be cast down to hell, or you need to be crucified or something. Like that's the only way you can get something.
Right. Yeah.
Is through suffering.
And like, that's a good point, because I don't know, it just feels like some religions are a little more based on, like, I think of Odin, right? Where he, like, all right, I'm gonna hang from a tree and lose an eye and I'm gonna get the knowledge of the runes, right?
Yeah.
But and that, I think that's also a sense of suffering, but to me it's more of like that personal, like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm making this sacrifice, I'm gonna be the hanged man in the tree, but at the end of it I'm getting this deeper knowledge
right
of the thing. Yeah. I don't know why that seemed like, to me, feels different. I don't know if it necessarily is like the personal sacrifice versus.
I think it's that nature of like, because one is choosing to do that and the other is like a group, like society doing that to someone.
Yes. Okay. That's a good point. Yes. Right. But
there's this
agency.
like but there's this thinker named Rene Girard. I think I don't know if he's a theologian.
Okay.
He's kind of Catholic, kind of not.
Sure.
But he had this idea of something called the scapegoat mechanism, which is that like when humans form societies, when things go wrong, it's much easier to scapegoat a single thing. And that's what we just do intrinsically. But he talks about like, and I think with the Odin one is like why it's different from Jesus. With Jesus, the point of Jesus dying and being crucified is that he's innocent. Like the murder of an innocent person is supposed to make people aware of, we murder, like it's supposed to make you aware that you're capable of doing horrible things. And that's like the benefit to society, or the moral in Christianity. But with Odin, it's almost like someone being like, I'm willing to, like, it's not even like you have to do anything, I'm gonna willingly sacrifice myself to gain something. And it doesn't really involve anyone else.
Yes, right. It's like, okay, if you want to use the runes, that's cool, but I'm doing this for me, like
And I mean, that whole story even is much more psychedelic. I mean, I know like Christianity can get kind of metal, but from what I recall, is like that whole, I guess even the idea of like hanging yourself and stabbing your eye out.
Right, exactly.
Right?
For 9 days. Yeah,
that's it. It's like doing PCP or something.
Exactly. Odin's rune bender,
If I ever make PCP, that's what I'm going to call it.
Oh my God, you absolutely should. Yes. Yes. Where are drugs legal now? Isn't it Oregon? Or isn't everything legal there? I don't know if PCP is.
I keep reading news stories of like different like Portugal legalizing it, but I'm never sure if they're real. I don't know what.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? I never know what that means.
Well, of course, yes. Well, especially now, I feel like news is so much more about just like a sensationalist headline rather than a based in any fact. Like there was some news story recently that was going all over the place that was about how like some lab had studied the air in offices to try to make the argument that like the way that the HVAC systems essentially work in offices means that it's safe to work there, even if there's a coronavirus epidemic happening.
That's so interesting.
Yes, and this study was being shared. Of course, the New York Post, I'm pretty sure, shared it because they're garbage. But it was all over the place, and like you have to get to like the second paragraph of that article to read that like it wasn't peer reviewed. That study wasn't peer reviewed. Like you can do a study and say whatever you want, but unless there's like proof and unless somebody else can replicate your data, that doesn't fucking mean anything. Like anyway, let's
it comes out in like even more extreme examples like flat earth people and vortex math or stuff like that. Like, you know what I mean? Just like there's like a weird, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like anti-science science.
Yeah.
Because it's always the people who don't believe in science do like these scientific studies. But without the process of like, someone should repeat your experiment and verify it or be critical. Like the idea of being critical is almost like take it out.
Yes, exactly.
The process. But they do like, who's the guy who did the like, what's it? He took like an altimeter or something in a plane, he took a level.
Yeah,
it was just a level on a plane to show that it was level the whole time. Stuff like that. And he's just like videotaping it, and like the commentary is just like, yeah, totally level, no movement, still level. I watched that video and I remember thinking like and again it goes back to all these different like religious people, people freaking out about Satan. It's always just like you're feeding back. You're like, it's blowing your mind at its level. You're like, this is the proof right before my eyes.
Exactly.
The level's stable. Yeah.
It's exactly. It's like you decide what would be proof, and then you find that proof, and then you use that proof to prove your theory, right? Where it's like you're not like, again, probably the thing that I took away from college that was the best was taking a statistics class. It was a whole research methodology class for sociology. And the professor said, he's like, the scientific method, you never prove anything. You only disprove and you fail to disprove. And to me, that's really powerful because it's like, if you have that sensibility going into anything, you're like, this is the best working model that we have now. But it's open to data and different interpretation and different measures to say like, okay, this could be something else, right? But if you go into something and you decide like, I know what this is, I'm going to prove what this is. Like, you don't know shit. Like, first of all, stop. You don't know anything. Second of all, no.
Well, and I think it's like, that's why it's hard for scientists to like explain to the public often the work, because it's like negative knowledge. You're only proving what you don't know.
That's it. Yes.
And I think people think of science as like you learn something, right? You gain knowledge, and like you said, more often than not, it's just like, okay, so that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And then maybe you get a period where it's like, this might be, I feel like we're in that with like quantum physics, where it's like, this is as close as we can get to right. It's not right, but it's as close as we can get.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think that's why we're seeing the rise of this new satanic panic with QAnon, and then flat earth and cultists, and even I think like this whole ancient aliens thing, which is like it's God for people who think that they're too cool for God, right? Like they're like, I'm too smart for a religion, but they're not comfortable enough with ambiguity to accept that there are just things that they're not going to know. And so they're like, they want an answer, right? They want to believe in this overarching government conspiracy, a globalist conspiracy, right? Or they want to believe that aliens built everything, or they want to believe that the earth is flat because NASA and what else? And the World Trade Organization or whatever, trying to hide, like
Google Earth was built by the CIA, you know. Do you know
So was
NASA has an
Facebook.
artistic director? That's a good point. Yeah. It's all a CIA psyop.
I mean, okay, that wouldn't surprise me, honestly, but also it's, again, people are not comfortable with the idea of like, hey, I might not know. Like, I think it's very liberating and very powerful, because then you get to decide what is important to you and live that way. But I think a lot of people are just like, oh shit, I don't know what I believe. I'm scared to be a real person. Nobody's given me the space to figure out who I really am or what I really care about. And then, all right, let's go in neck deep on Ancient Aliens. That's it right there.
Well, and I think that like that specific like when in the 90s, kind of post Satanic Panic, when there was the new atheism movement,
yes,
like with Christopher Hitchens and I forget, I guess Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
I forget all the people who were like really big then. But and like I was very young at that time, but I still remember like when YouTube was starting or social media, people share it like obsessively, because it was like middle and early high school.
Yes.
So you know, being an atheist was still like cool. But like rewatching those, I mean, it's weird because you just think that like the big thing they all kind of ignore is that a lot of people need to believe in something.
Right.
And that a lot of these guys were very nihilistic. I mean, Christopher Hitchens, like even in like middle and high school, I remember thinking like that guy is like a really pessimistic worldview.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
And I think that like when there's people who I think were inspired by that, but then in kind of like you said, a Nietzschean way, I still need something to believe in.
Right.
And if it's not going to be religion, I kind of don't know what that is.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you find, like you read, and I find it interesting that they all talk about like watching documentaries or finding things on the internet. Because like every QAnon person brings that up when I see interviews of them, where they're like, I watched a documentary, Flat Earth too.
Oh yeah.
And they're like 3, 4 hour, 5 hour YouTube documentaries where they just kind of connect dots. And I think like, it's people being like, this makes sense. Like I need something to make sense.
Yeah.
Besides that, it's just I don't know anything. So this is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and that because it's like the way you think that like, you know, human brains are developed and have evolved to put together information, right? Again, we're talking about survival. Like, what do you need to do to survive when resources are limited and the world is trying to kill you, right?
Yeah.
So you are putting things together and making things work so you can keep yourself alive, your group alive, right? And so you put all this information that is not connected, but you make connections. You're like, oh, isn't this interesting? This person, oh, all these celebrities have photos of black eyes on their left eye. Like it's an Illuminati ritual, you know? And it's like, you just put all that data in front of a person and they're like, hey, it's probably because of this. And you're like, yeah, why do all these famous people have pictures of them with a black eye on their like left eye? Like, what is that, you know?
Because it has to mean something. It can't just be like, it has to mean something.
Right. It can't just be random data points, right? It has to be an Illuminati conspiracy, right? Like it can't, like again, you know, you and I've talked enough about Marcuse, right? Like this idea that we live in a society where people are alienated from themselves and what they want and what they think and who they are. And so like, I feel very comfortable making my own meaning in things, but that took a while, right? And it took a lot of work because nothing in my upbringing, well, maybe like 3 things in my upbringing allowed for that, you know? So I held on to those and cultivated those. But the majority of people, again, are taught their entire lives, like who you are, what you want is either sinful or evil or all of those or worse, you know? And so how do you make your own decisions? How do you start creating meaning? How are you comfortable with the idea that something might not have a meaning or something might have a meaning that is in flux? Like there's just there's no room for it. So like, to me, I'm not surprised when people get super anti-vax or into QAnon or into whatever, because they're like, well, I don't trust these things. I have no reason to trust these things. But then like again, that I understand. It's the then like, well, I trust this dude on the internet who created a 5-hour YouTube documentary. It's like, why that guy, or that woman or that person, whatever. It's just like, why? Like,
well, I think it goes back to bring it full circle. It goes back to magical thinking, because I think a lot of like people who practice ritual magic, I mean, I hope most would agree that you have to like find your own results, and that results are very subjective.
Yeah.
And when you look at Crowley's life, I mean, all of the, I guess, magical grades he got are self-assigned. Like, I don't think, you know what I mean? Well, and it's like, because you'll just go, like, he'll have an experience on like every, like, and he does the same thing where it's like, this has to mean something, whether it's like, when his wife, I forget the full story, but when his wife was like telling him to go to this statue of Horus that was like exhibit 666 on their honeymoon and stuff like that, and writing the book of the law, like all of those instances in his life, he gives himself like a promotion, well, and that's the thing, it's like, because to him it's like, there, no one else is going to do it for you, kind of, which is weirdly kind of punk and DIY to just be like, I've ascended,
Exactly. I created the evidence for my own ascension. Like, yes.
But that's the weird thing is that, like, I think it works, and I don't know if it worked for him, but for like the people who I think came after him or were like around him at the time, like especially I think of like Jack Parsons, right, and like rocket science, so much of what he writes about is like seeing magic and rocket science is the same thing. They're both like unattainable goals. But like in that instance, he did, pioneer rocket science. He's like the founder of Jet Propulsion Labs. And and I think that's like, because it's funny because I think they just mentioned him last year on their website.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't include him. I think because of all the magic.
Probably.
But like I think like I forget who, but there was a biographer who said if it weren't for that, he wouldn't have had the vision to, because I think even at that time, like I think we forget this because we all at this point, most of us have grown up in the wake of the space race. But prior to like 1950, rocket science like was not a science. It was more of like a hobby for like Boy Scout troop. Like literally, like, and there was, because in the 40s there was just rocket propulsion societies, and they're all like teenagers building like those janky little cardboard rockets with like gunpowder, and America was very different then. But that's what he starts doing, is he has like mail-in science magazine subscriptions, and they send you like rocket kits, which again, I want to illustrate, are just like baggies of gunpowder and like cardboard pieces.
Jesus.
But like, you gotta start somewhere.
You do, exactly. I respect it.
But it's because he discovers both at a young age, and I think it's interesting that he finds both of them are so resonant that he like dedicates his life kind of equally to both.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think like he's someone in my mind who's like kind of a successful magician. I don't know if it's because he was doing ritual magic, but maybe just the mindset to think of like, I want to go to the moon, I want to go in space, and there's nothing that can stop me from wanting to do that one way or the other.
Well, and also this idea of, again, being a magical practitioner, it gets you kind of in this alchemical mindset, right? Like of how can I convert these things? How can I change these things? How can I make things? How can I create something from nothing? Like that is like, it's a bold statement to make. It's a bold thought to have, like, no, fuck you, I'm doing this my way. I'm going to figure out a way.
For sure.
Like that has always spoken to me about magic, of like, no, okay, all right, you have your system, that's fine. I bet I can figure something out over here, and I bet I can study and do rituals and do practices that will get me the results that I'm looking for. And then, you're going to act surprised. Whereas like, no, I knew this would work. Like I had to, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like the self-belief, like just believing in something and putting your focus into it.
Yes, exactly.
You'll get some sort of result, even if it's just like you act differently or you think of it differently.
Well, and that it's like, again, I talked about this with Mark Obscure in a previous episode. It's like like reprogramming your brain, right? Like
Yeah.
you, like at the very least, I mean, I feel like that's where you need to start with all of this, right? You just need to
Mhm.
believe that things are possible, because believing that things are possible will allow that you to seek out the opportunities that make something possible. Whereas if you are like, you want something to happen but you don't like truly believe it's going to, you're not going to see it, you know. And it's like, it's like the
Right.
fundamental thing you have to do in order to open yourself up to all these different kinds of realities. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that like going off of that and maybe going to Kenneth Anger, like
Yes.
in
Yeah.
terms of, well, just in terms of as a filmmaker, like a big point he makes is that film is a medium of light. It's a
Mm.
light-based medium, and people don't really think of it like that. They think of it
Right.
as like narrative or storytelling, but
Yes.
I think it's such an interesting perspective. When he talks about the core element of a film
Mhm.
is projecting something, projecting light onto a wall.
Right. Oh
And the
my
founding
God.
of like Thelema is you
Yeah.
know, not like Satan worship, but appreciation of Satan.
Yeah, of course.
Lucifer is the light bringer. So
Yes.
Kenneth Anger in the 40s put this together of like he was gonna be a Thelemic Satanist filmmaker because
Oh
it's
my
the
God.
right, it's super mind-blowing. He's a
Yes.
totally out there guy.
Yes.
Um, but that's where he saw the two merging. And he made, I think it's like, I don't know how many films. I'm gonna say 28, but that's definitely not the number. It's probably way
Okay.
lower. But he made a 28-part series called the Magic Lantern Cycle, which is like a full multi-part ritual using film as like a way of
Yes.
projecting spells because it's light based. That's like his whole thing is like he's doing light magic
Right.
through film.
That's that's incredible.
I
I
know what in terms of taking these ideas of like being a magician or ritual magic and applying them
yes.
to art, he very
Yes.
directly found a way of, you know, thinking about his art in a magical way.
Yeah.
And you know, like there's no like plot really in the films. I would say
Mhm.
they're very surreal at best.
Sure.
Um and but he doesn't have like dialogue. It's all music, just visuals. But
Mhm.
he's trying to like, I think in a way that if you create your own rituals or people have
Yes.
in chaos magic or other things, you're creating images or like movements or gestures. And so
Yes.
that's what his movies are all made of: images, motions,
Yes.
gestures that are repeated. And he's super connected. I think that's the other thing is like,
Yeah.
he's not just like some, I think for people who don't know him, he's not like a totally crazy outsider.
Yes.
Like Martin Scorsese and David Lynch have both cited him as a major influence.
Mhm.
Scorsese said like the use of pop music comes from Kenneth Anger.
Oh
So like
wow.
Goodfellas and playing like
Yes.
50s, 60s pop songs that came from watching Kenneth Anger's movies.
Oh my God.
David Lynch said his whole visual style, like especially in trying to think what the weirder ones are, like Mulholland Drive,
Yes.
that's taken from Kenneth Anger, especially the surrealism of it.
Yes.
So he's like a big dude in a kind of like low key, too weird for Hollywood sort of way. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Well,
still has
again,
had this major impact.
yeah, clearly. Well, it's funny you mentioned this because now I'm thinking in terms of like Jack Parsons, where it's like, oh, we don't mention the magic guy, right?
Mhm.
Like we can't mention the ritual occultist, right? Who has changed the landscape of film, you know, through like his work and inspiring others. Like I think
Well, and
it's
even at the time, he was like, sorry to interrupt. Because
no,
I wanted to say,
please.
like, at the time when he started, his first film is called Fireworks.
Mm.
It's in 1947, and it's a very explicitly gay film.
Oh wow,
It's about,
yes.
it stars himself, so it's about Kenneth Anger. It's like a fever dream about a group of sailors who like gangbang him in an alley. Like that's the plot of the film, and it's very like explicit. There's
Yeah.
like a shot of him, and then there's a shot of a bunch of like flexing like sailors, and then there's a scene of him being roped, and then it ends with two really incredible sequences. One is just white paint being dumped on his face, which in 47, I don't think I found another movie that was
No.
as explicit about gay sex as that is.
Right.
Uh, but the final image is just a burning Christmas tree being walked through this like very suburban 50s household.
Oh my
And
God.
he really, he's like, I think he was like 19. He was very young when he made that movie.
Oh my
And there was
God.
and it was, he said like he got through, like the openness to speak about it came through from Thelema, like do as thou wilt is the whole of the law. I'm not gonna
Yes.
not be myself, even though it's
Yes.
illegal. And there was a whole obscenity trial, which I can't imagine it like being 19 or 20 or something.
Oh my God. Right.
And
Oh
then,
my.
but in this court case, they like the prosecution brings up like obviously the homoerotic theme of the movie, and then
Mhm.
also the fact that he's a practicing like witch or something.
Yes.
So he like when he was young, which I think when you're that like you're still trying to figure out what you believe, and so
Yes.
Thelema or witchcraft, you might not be super committed, and then you're on trial and they're asking you about like,
Oh
so
my
you practice sexual magic rituals,
God.
and
Right.
you did that in order to make this movie. And he won that case. He didn't get, thankfully.
Oh my God. Good. Yes.
But in terms of just, it's not just like he's someone who made stuff that people saw and were like artistically inspired by. I think
Yes.
it's also that he was able to like, yeah, go like that's so against the grain of that time
Oh my
to
God.
make a film like
Absolutely.
that.
Yes.
I think you like he wouldn't have done that, or I think it would have been like a lot of other people, much more subtle or through
Yes.
innuendo than as
Yes.
it's so explicit. If anyone hasn't seen Fireworks, just watch it because it's so on the nose. It's he gets a little more subtle as like he keeps making movies, but that one's very like in your face in kind
Of
of an
course.
amazing way.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the rest of my day is just going to be watching Kenneth Anger films because I know
Oh
you'd
yeah,
mentioned it
yeah.
before, but yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well,
and he gets like he has one called Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, and that's explicitly about Thelema. It's the
yeah,
Thelemic like pantheon of gods.
yeah,
And they each have their own segment. So there's times where it even gets very satanic and
yeah.
openly. I don't know. It's a very weird mix of things.
Of course, yes. But just, talking about like Thelema again, true will and to
Mhm.
be inspired. And again, at that young of an age, to have that sensibility of like, no, I'm making this thing. No, I'm going to defend myself, because like, I don't know if he was, again, I don't know much about him, but if he was like as contrary, as this kind of speaks to in the middle of at the beginning of post World War II cultural amnesia, where we're all going to forget that the last several years happen, and we're all just going to pretend like women are going back to the homes and being little homemakers, and like nobody's going to talk about the collective trauma that they went through. And for him to just like be so in your face about all of that, like that's incredibly powerful. And probably the pushback was even more emboldening. Like even if he was like 19 and like not sure if he believed in it or not, after going to trial, man, I'd be like, yeah,
Yeah,
this
you're
is what
like
I'm doing
this
forever.
does work. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
really is working.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Results-based magic. Yeah.
And I think that like a lot of when I think there's an element like Crowley or any other magician where you're not always sure what's true and what's not with Kenneth Anger.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through his career, there's a lot of like these coincidences of he's like connected to so many different people. Jack Parsons says I think his second wife stars in two of his movies. Marjorie Cameron's in them, which
Yes.
is like Thelema super group.
Of course.
You
Yes,
know.
exactly.
Or I'm trying to think of so he has a film called Lucifer Rising, which was like I think his last big
Yeah.
in his first wave of films, was like the last big one. And the guy who did the soundtrack, first of all, originally the soundtrack was going to be done by Jimmy Page, and then his management was like, because Jimmy Page talks what he would do, like magic and stuff. But his
Yes.
management said like you can't be involved, like this is too
Right.
you can't like, which I think is funny for a band like Led Zeppelin that was
Oh,
so occulty and stuff like
yes,
that. But
right.
there was this line in the sand that was like, yeah, I know you do magic too, but this guy's
Yeah.
he's gonna ruin. Like I think it was pictures like this will ruin your career or something. So at the last minute, Kenneth Anger talks about he had to fill someone in, and the guy he got is Bobby Beausoleil,
Mm-hmm.
who's part of the Manson family.
Oh my God.
And that's the original soundtrack to Lucifer Rising.
Jesus.
Which is, and like I don't, none of it is like explicit until you look back and you realize. I think at the time it would seem very coincidental.
Of course,
Um,
yes.
And I think it's connected to why he stopped making movies, is that the guy he got to make the soundtrack was then like, I think a couple months later, involved in these horrible murders.
Oh God.
And the cult, you know, like into the
Yes.
60s. So, and I don't know, it always strikes me as very weird. He's connected to a lot of like
Yes.
the people who kind of think ended the positivity of the 60s.
Yes.
Kenneth Anger's like friends with all of them in a way.
Oh no.
Not saying that he's responsible, but just like
No.
it's funny when you go through and read
Yeah.
his like story, like all these people, like Manson, even L. Ron Hubbard, because L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons were good friends.
That's it.
They
Yes.
all crossed paths with Kenneth Anger
Oh my
at some
God.
point,
Yes.
which is just weird to think about.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, and that it's like, again, when you start making those connections between all, like you said, the super
Yeah.
group, right? And you're just like, holy
Yeah.
shit, all these people, we're in each other's orbit at the very least, or we're good friends in some cases.
Yeah.
And like this influenced modern thought more than anybody, I think, realizes, you know, that it's like, it's everywhere. It's influencing everything.
Well, and the fact that they were all connected still to Aleister Crowley, who was still
Yes.
like, he was super old and not really a powerful magician anymore.
Right.
Kind of ended on sad heroin addict, but he was writing to all these people. Like I think that's the funniest thing.
Oh, absolutely.
He was still around for them. Like Jack Parsons has letters with him.
Yes.
Kenneth Anger flew to England to meet him and stuff like that.
Damn, yeah.
And it's interesting, like, to think that they would go to like, because I don't know. I always would think, I guess he's like an Ozzy Osbourne. I kind of thought he would just die
Right.
way sooner.
Right.
Than he has. But yeah, it's like a community that's still kind of, because
Yeah.
it's still going on. I think that was the funniest part, because there's a church of Thelema.
Yeah.
And I think they have a base in California still.
Oh, do they really? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know with COVID. Who knows?
Who knows anything anymore? Exactly. Yes.
But I it's interesting because they're trying to be like non-Crowley. I thought that was interesting.
Yes.
I gave them a call and was trying to ask them some questions about stuff.
Oh, really?
And they were like, yeah, because I was just asking about like him as a person, and they were like, you know, we don't really, and they kind of gave me this explanation of like, they're more into the religion, and he's kind of like, I think it's kind of like a Jesus or Joseph Smith thing, like, you know, where it's like, we don't really talk about that guy. Yeah, I guess that's not Jesus, but definitely Joseph Smith, where it's just like, you know,
Definitely.
Look, a lot of people founded this thing. I don't think we could point to any one person who came up with this. I think a lot of people. That's what I think is funny. It's like he's still even almost too toxic for the people who follow his religion.
Oh my God, that's so wild to me. Because again, it's like you have a modern religious movement, right? Where like the people met this guy, right? It wasn't just some legendary figure in the past. And I can understand if some of the things that they did, you don't necessarily want to be associated with them, but to act like to just kind of sweep it under the rug.
Like they weren't the person who came up with the whole thing.
Invented the whole thing, right? Like wrote all the books. Like it's one dude. We can point to the one dude who invented this.
And I would say like he's consistent, like for the most part. Like even in like Jack Parsons' letter, when he starts making rituals, Crowley starts talking like so much shit about this Parsons guy and how he's messing up all his rituals. Because I think there's a point where like both Kenneth Anger and Jack, like I think with any magician, you start coming up with your own stuff.
Of course, yeah.
I think that's kind of the beauty of Thelema, is it can be individual. It's kind of like a starter kit, maybe.
Yeah.
You don't feel comfortable doing the full chaos magic, inventing your own rituals and systems and stuff. Yeah. It kind of is like, here's some Egyptian gods, here's some like esoteric Gnostic magic, and here's a little bit of Calvinistic Christianity. Yes. Go to town.
Yeah, have fun.
Well, that's right, and like you can like whatever you want to do with those things. You know, exactly. But like like when people start doing that, even Kenneth Anger, he talks about like I think he shows Crowley like some stills of inauguration of the Pleasure Dome. He's like, I want to get your notes on what the pantheon of gods is like. Yeah. And he like writes this just like I've heard too. It's someone else. He like he calls him like atrocious and like aesthetically flawed or whatever. Like, it's so funny. He's so against it. And I think it's just because it's like it's not his vision of what these are.
Right, of course. Yeah.
But I think in that respect, like, that's where you can't ignore him. Because even through his life, he was consistent with this belief.
That's
He didn't kind of like give up on it. Like, I think a lot of other religious leaders kind of at the end.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Like, not to anger your Mormon viewers, but Joseph Smith at the end kind of like tries to backtrack, a lot of stuff. L. Ron Hubbard too. Like, I think there's a lot of backtracking. I think Thelema is the one where like there's kind of no.
Right.
I think he like obviously had a horrible life, but I don't think at any point he was like, this was like a pointless thing that I did.
Right. Yes. Right. Like, I mean, I even think, I can't remember, was he writing to L. Ron Hubbard or writing to somebody when he was complaining about like the Moonchild ritual and being done?
I think that's I don't know if it's to Jack, but it's definitely about
Jack. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And he's just like, he calls it like an idiotic venture or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Like, he clearly had feelings and thoughts about his system throughout his life. And like you said, I don't know of him recanting anything at the end or anything like that, and there are plenty of people who are, use the work and use it for their magical purposes. Like, cool. But to ignore who Crowley was and what he did, like, I don't know. I think it, again, just wrap that in there. Just say like, yeah, we disavow some of his behaviors, but this was the man who created this religious system that we adhere to. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the part I don't get it. It's like, yeah, we believe in it, but not like him.
Right.
Call me on his passion. I feel like that's kind of the basis of a religion. It's like there's a guy you believe in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's super, and I think like you can also appreciate that he was also a person, like I imagine every other, like Jesus was, or Muhammad, or any other kind of religion. And I like when you look in terms of him hating Kenneth Anger's movies. I mean, Crowley has his own artistic influences. Like, he loves Oscar Wilde and Jonathan Swift. Yes. I mean, I think the poem most people have heard, like, that's When Celia Comes, or When Celia Farts, or whatever. Yes. It's one of the dirtier ones.
Yes.
But that's a ripoff of a Jonathan Swift poem.
Oh, is it really?
Dressing. It's the exact same plot, but it's just more, I don't know, Victorian. It's more Jonathan Swift, but it's essentially the same thing of like a lady's dressing room.
Yes.
And they're all farting and like shitting and spitting.
All right.
And I'll say this, like, it's objectively way better.
Okay.
It's a way better poem.
Yes.
If anyone's interested in that. Because Crowley's not a good poet, but he has very like strong ideas about what being a good artist and poet is.
Clearly, yes.
And I think that like that's something you can, even if you don't like, a lot of the actions, I guess, the personal decisions he made. Yeah. I think there's still things like his views on art. I mean, that's what I kind of don't get, is he had very clear ideas about aesthetics and like metaphysics and stuff. Yes. And I think philosophy does this all the time. I think there's thinkers people acknowledge are horrible people.
Yes.
Like Martin Heidegger was a Nazi.
Right. Yes.
And people still, I mean, the amount of times in college someone would quote Martin Heidegger in a class was like maddening,
Of course.
And so I kind of don't get why that isn't separated out, because I think just about everyone else does it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. In other disciplines, you can say like, okay, and even just like in music, right? You can talk about like, all right, well, this musician did this terrible thing, we can acknowledge that and also talk about the music. Yeah.
Separating the art from the artist.
Right. Yes. I don't know if you can, again, I don't think you can 100% do that, but I think you can evaluate a person on top of, you can, well, I don't know. I'm kind of like of two minds about this, because on the one hand, some people like love music so much, they're completely unwilling to talk about a musician as a terrible person, to the point of like denial of alleged abuses, like multiple people alleging abuse. So on the one hand, it's like, all right, you can't go too far down the rabbit hole in terms of this, but I think this awareness that like, anything that you are experiencing, any artistic, creative venture like that, whether or not you believe it was inspired by something otherworldly, it was channeled through a person. And so that filter is going to affect some things and maybe just acknowledge that there is a human involved in that as well, as opposed to, no, it's just this otherworldly thing and we can't acknowledge any of this.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
there's plenty of like it happens, I think, in every respect, like for everyone when they love something. I think when you
Yes.
look at like punk music and the early punk scene, I mean, there's a lot of questionable things, like wearing swastika shirts,
Yeah.
or I just the prominent use of swastikas and Nazi imagery in punk movement.
Yes.
But it's like when you think of it, it's at the time, especially in like British punk, it's meant to just be shocking. And I don't think,
Right.
because you know, again, I think a lot of the time these are like teenagers who end up doing or making music like this.
Yes.
You know, they're not thinking of the greater social implication of like wearing, they're just trying to piss someone off or be controversial.
Yes.
And those are questionable parts about punk music that I
Yeah.
think no one likes talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's generally seen as like a radical, and I think especially to a certain extent like leftist sort of music, but there's like definitely
Right.
problematic things with it that you have to be realistic about.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. Again, it's like acknowledging all sides of a thing as opposed to just pulling a flat earth about any of this. And you're like, no, it's not real. Or here's this elaborate conspiracy for me to tell you why it's okay. You know, like, no, just
Right,
acknowledge
yeah.
that things happen. That's fine. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is like it's fine. Like forget I forget which Ramon is really conservative.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I
forget
do.
is
Yeah.
it Johnny Ramone?
I can't remember. Yeah.
One of the Ramones is super conservative, and I think it's like that's fine. You know, I love the Ramones. The Ramones
Sure.
are awesome.
Yes.
But it's also like, you know, like I'm not I don't need to follow everything the Ramones do or believe everything they believe.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, and I think it's, you know, they were fairly like working class or middle class as kids.
Yes.
So I think that conservative like ideas of security or financial responsibility, like if you grew up without a lot of money, that's something that speaks more to you
Of course.
and your
Yes.
values.
Yes.
And I think in the same way that you can whitewash, you could be like, yeah, but I'm not like a racist conservative. Like it's kind of it's that sort of thing where it's just like I'm like a fiscal conservative.
Exactly.
I don't believe in all that other stuff. I think you like, you know, but yeah, and I think with Crowley or any like magician,
Yeah.
they're all kind of horrible people. That's kind of like
Right.
right? Like I don't
Right.
think anyone comes out that clean in terms of magic.
Of course. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just the whole process of it. It's like you might get in some questionable things in order to get some results. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think the only thing like I've been reading that's semi-magic related, would maybe be a whole other hour of talking.
Yeah.
But like I've been interested more in like 90s like cybernetics movement.
Oh yeah.
Sort of stuff. So I was reading a lot of stuff from this thing called the CCRU. They were like a research group, in Warwick University in the 90s. But really interested in like I guess that's when everyone says they like lose their minds. But it's interesting to read the stuff they produce when they're doing like I actually think they live in Aleister Crowley's house too.
Oh really?
That might be the connection. I think for a time they do like rituals, cybernetic rituals.
Oh no. Cool.
But sorry, out of that group too, of all these weird magical people, there's like Mark Fisher is part of that group.
Oh really?
Like Jake and Dinos Chapman were like YBA British artists.
Yes.
A bunch of jungle drum and bass like producers are in that group.
Oh my god, wild.
I know. Well, and that's like all their like rituals involve like drum and bass. It's very intense.
Cool.
Do you want to intensify your magical practice? I guess that's what you add to it.
Apparently, yes. Cool.
But yeah, I think the same way, like, I think a lot of people think they're crazy. I think there's a lot of strains of magical, especially with like feminism and cyber feminism, xenofeminism, these kind of 90s movements with decentralizing organization and how that's like a feminist type gesture, I guess, or urge to do. I've been finding that very interesting. And that's not explicitly magical, but I think there's something interesting that they connect those two things together.
Totally. Yes. Well, just like you were talking about with Kenneth Anger, like adapting to new technology or adapting to what is changing in the world, right? Like that there isn't just one static magical system. I was talking about this with Mortellus in the episode that's going to be coming out tomorrow. Just this idea that like, okay, if we are believing in gods or we're believing in a magical system, like, do we think that like everything stopped in like what, like 1500 BC or AD 1000, you know, that it was some distant time in the past and we're just, you know, kind of reciting and regurgitating again all these old things, as opposed to like adapting again, like to see that like film as light and understanding like, okay, making the connection to Lucifer, making the connection to ritual magic, like there's power in that, right? And there is this like, there is power again in anything that we create. There is a power to use that for magical purposes. Like, why wouldn't there be, right? Because even creation of technology, that's like, it's exerting your will, right? There's a certain magical sensibility to it. You are inventing something alchemical. Something didn't exist before. And here it is now. Like, or like we use it every day, right? Here's a cell phone. This is basically like telepathy, and you use it all the time. Yeah.
And I think there's an element of exchange that's really inherent to especially like network-based technology.
Yeah.
Like another Thelemite, it's really hard to find info on this guy.
Okay.
If I guess if anyone who's Russian wants to, but Andrei Chernov is like one of the founders of Runet, which is like the Russian internet, and he's a Thelemite. And a lot of like what I found, I mean, it's very scarce,
sure,
because he's kind of a low-key guy, but he talks a lot about programming and the exchange of signs in the way that magic does, or that signs are interchangeable.
Yes.
And so like I think his two big things are he developed a Cyrillic, God, I forget what it's called. It's like what allows a computer to process symbols out of binary code. So it's like how you're able to type in English on your computer is because there's a program in that computer that assigns different data to each letter.
Gotcha.
So he did that for Cyrillic, which I think is called UTI 80 or something like that. And then worked on a very early internet forum where he would just publish like everything that was banned in the late Soviet Union. So like, and you can still go on it.
Amazing.
I think there's like a decaying website, but on there's like Aleister Crowley books and Antonin Artaud plays.
Oh yes.
There's like experimental cinema and like avant-garde art. It was just kind of like a dumping ground, I guess, in the same way that 2 or 4chan or like Reddit is kind of like that now. It was like an early version, just a repository for anything countercultural or explicit or that you couldn't get access to in a Soviet country. And he had a lot of thoughts on magic, like this being a form of magic, the dissemination and like freeing of information for people.
Yes. Oh my God.
And
yes.
Again, I think it's like a Jack Parsons thing. I don't know if he had like, I think again, it's no one talks about him being like a Thelemite.
Right. Yes.
But I think it's that mindset that allows you to be like, I'm going to create like, a telepathic forum where you can download information that's non-accessible. It's really, I mean, it's like you can abstract it to the point where you start thinking about, or even making your own programming language, being like, I'm exchanging different signs.
Yes.
And that's all I'm doing.
Oh
right.
God.
So it's like people take it in all kinds of directions.
Yes, absolutely. That's incredible.
I know. I wish I could learn more, but I don't speak Russian. And it's just it's a lot of kind of I'm so bad at learning languages.
Are you?
I cannot. So the struggle of like high school Spanish, which I know is like, I don't know. It was just I'm sure if I just focused on it, I could. But there's something in me that is just not learning languages.
That's understandable. Especially too, you could just find somebody who is fluent in Russian who could probably find sources for you and figure out how to get the information to you.
Yeah, I think the other problem is that like I have to have like access to all of the websites he built are in that programming language, which I don't think anyone uses anymore.
Oh,
so I think that's the other problem is it's like I need to I don't know how I would do this, but run a really obscure Cyrillic programming language on my computer, you know. Which is also because I was when I was going through, I was like, it's cool that you did this, but you kind of fucked it up because now I don't know how to see any of the stuff you said.
That's it, exactly.
because it's from the 90s, so it's like,
Oh my
in
God.
terms of technology time, right? It's like a million years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know kids today don't know what websites used to look like back in the day.
I kind of wish old website aesthetics would come back.
I miss them, honestly. There was something kind of like primal and fun about them.
When we were joking a while ago on about like going to like old UFO sites,
Yes.
like where it's just green text on black or whatever, or like there's like clip art alien graphics.
Yes, exactly.
I want that to come back because I feel like when you brought up Ancient Aliens, there's a lot of like really high rendered 3D alien
Right.
stuff, like art and stuff going on. I really miss the bare bonesness of early internet
Absolutely.
UFO.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Like you said, just like green text, black background, but everything you ever need to know because they want the message out there. Like,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching, depending on where you find this podcast. You can follow Personal Pans at Personal Pans on Instagram and Twitter. You can find me at Kali Butterfly. It's Kali Butterfly on Twitter. And I think that's it. If you like what you're doing, leave a review, leave a comment. If you have something weird you want to talk about, reach out to me on Twitter. I'm pretty much always on Twitter. Anyway, thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you have a playful and curious day.